Okay, there really are Jews in Israel. And various people who claim that the Jews in the tiny nation of Israel are not ethnically Jews claim that a group from an area north of Turkey, just above Georgia, called the Khazars, are converted to Judaism about 1,300 years ago, and that the descendants of these 8th century AD Khazars dominated the nation of Israel. Black Israelite adherents point to that to explain why Israelites are not black. Israelites. But since there is so much archeological evidence prior to the 8th century AD that the Hebrews were not Negroes, that makes the Khazar claims, even if they were accurate, irrelevant. The Black Israelites are clearly wrong about Judah being Negroes as they claim. There's a little plaque, I think, a poster outlining the Black Hebrew Israelite identification of the 12 tribes of Israel with modern peoples of color. Over here, see these book on the 12, the Seminole Indians, North American Indians, the Cubans, and so on. All the 12 of them, the Mexicans, so on. Well, let's see. John 4, 9-10. Then the woman of Samaria was said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." So she identifies who he is. You're a Jew. Jesus answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God, and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and I would have given you living water." So, also the genealogy of Jesus is listed in both Matthew 1, 1-3, and Luke 3, 23-33, teach that Jesus was a descendant of Judah, hence a Jew. Okay. Notice that Jesus passed through a crowd. That's another big thing. He passed through a crowd as if he was one of them. They didn't know him all that well. He just started his ministry. He didn't have all kinds of identification points that would say he was different, especially his flesh color or his features. Jesus returned to Galilee in the power of the Spirit. News about him spread through all the surrounding district, and he began teaching in their synagogues and was praised by all. And he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and it was his custom. He entered the synagogue on the Sabbath and stood up to read. And the book of one of them, and the book of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him, and he opened up this book and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the favorable year of the Lord." It's preaching the gospel. This is the announcement of the Messiah, HaMashiach, Messiah Savior. And he closed the book, though, and gave it back to the attendant before finishing the passage, and sat down, and the eyes of all the synagogue were fixed on him. And he began to say to them, "Today the scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." And all were speaking well of him, wondering at the gracious words which were falling from his lips, and they were saying, "Is this not Joseph's son?" And he said to them, "No doubt you will quote this proverb to me, 'Physician, heal yourself. Whatever we heard was done at Capernaum, do here in your hometown as well.'" And because he's performing miracles. And he said, "Truly I say to you, no prophet is welcome in his hometown." Kind of foretelling what was about to happen. "But I say to you in truth, there were many widows in Israel in the days of Elijah, when the sky was shut up for 3 years and 6 months, when a great famine came in over the land. And yet Elijah was sent to none of them." Excuse for that phone call. Where did I leave off? And he said to them, "No doubt you will quote this proverb to me, 'Physician, heal yourself. Whatever we heard was done at Capernaum, do here in your hometown as well.'" With miracles. And he said, "Truly I say to you, no prophet is welcome in his hometown. But I say to you in truth, there were many widows in Israel in the days of Elijah, when the sky was shut up for 3 years and 6 months, when a great famine came over all the land. And yet Elijah was sent to none of them, but only Zarephath in the land of Sidon, to a woman who was a widow. And there were many lepers in Israel in the time of Elisha the prophet, and none of them was cleansed, but only Naaman the Syrian." So no miracles there because of where they were. And here it is, the same thing. And all the people in the synagogue were filled with rage as they heard these things. They're going to kill him. And they got up and drove him out of the city and led him to the brow of the hill on which their city had been built in order to throw him down the cliff. But passing through the midst, he went his way. That sounds like somewhat supernatural, but how could he pass through the midst if he was so different, a different race, different color? Hence, Jesus was the same race as the rest of the Jews. It is very plausible. Or he would have been able, or he would have been able, would he not have been able to easily identify, and would not have blended in with the crowd. He would not have been easy to identify, and would not have blended in with the crowd, plus Judas would not have had to be paid to point him out later on in Mark. This guy's not finishing his stuff. Mark 14. So since the bulk of the Jews were basically white by race, so was Jesus. Jesus would have been essentially a tanned olive color of a Caucasian person. He likely had dark colored hair. We have no original pictures of Jesus. The ones that are written in artistries are printed in some of these Bibles, especially Catholic Bibles, but many don't depict who he was. He didn't have long hair. That's the Nazarite vow by John the Baptist. Jesus had the hair like a carpenter would have. Didn't get in the way of building something. Ephraim and Manasseh. Is Ephraim now represented by Puerto Rico and Manasseh by Cuba, as some Black Hebrews claim? The answer is no. Consider the following. Then Israel saw Joseph's sons, and he said, "Who are these?" Joseph said to his father, "They are my sons, whom God has given me in this place." And he said, "Please bring them to me, and I will bless them." This happened. There's a kind of a messed up blessing here. Now the eyes of Israel were dim with age, so that he could not see. Then Joseph brought them down near him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, "I have not thought to see your face, but in fact, God has also shown me your offspring." So Joseph brought them from beside his knees. Remember, Joseph went to Egypt, had children, and now he's Israel, or Jacob, now sees his grandchildren. So Joseph brought them from beside his knees, and he bowed down with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim with his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh with his left hand toward Israel's right hand, the right hand of blessing, and brought them near him. Then Israel, this is what happened. Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head. Wait a minute. Who was the younger? And his left hand on Manasseh, guiding his hands knowingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, "God, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God has fed me all my life long to this day. The angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, let my name be named upon them." Remember, the angel of the Lord visited and wrestled with Jacob. "Let my name be named upon them, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth." Now when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the hand of Ephraim, and it displeased him, so he took hold of his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, "Not so, my father, for this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head." But his father refused and said, "I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great, a great people." Keep in mind, but truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations. So he blessed them that day, saying, "By you Israel will bless, saying, my God, make you as Ephraim and Manasseh." And thus he set Ephraim before Manasseh. Genesis 48:8-20. Now, the point here made by this author, while the British Empire grew to become a multitude of nations, which is the black Jews would claim, this is not really the case of Puerto Rico. Neither. And while many will consider that the USA became great, of course, that's not true. The USA is not in there either by symbolism or indirect figures of speech. Those people are not involved in the North American continent. Cuba is not in the same league either. So it debunks those two. Thus, Anglo-Saxon, Celtic, American, British, Israel is much more consistent with the prophecies of Jacob. Actually, they're not. For more details, see Anglo-American in Prophecy and the Lost Tribes of Israel. Well, that's another story. Remember, Scripture does not specifically figure that. We'll look at that next time. Getting back to ancient artifacts, very little from the ancient world is in color, but some materials beyond hieroglyphs and some paintings are. For example, are you familiar with the mosaics from the Hukok synagogue of the early 400s AD? Here is some information related to it and some of the mosaics there. We're going to take a look at that. Hukok in the Hebrew, you look at the Hebrew word, was an ancient Jewish village located 12.5 kilometers north of Tiberias. The area had been settled since ancient times and is mentioned in the book of Joshua. A 2011 dig led by archaeologist Jodai Magnus excavated several sections at the site of the former village. Among the structures uncovered during the 2012 dig were the remains of an elaborate synagogue dated to the 5th century. Findings include limestone carvings and an elaborate floor mosaic. The mosaic includes the biblical hero Samson. According to archaeologist Jodai Magnus, the discovery is significant because only a small number of ancient late Roman synagogue buildings are decorated with mosaics showing biblical scenes, and only 2 others have scenes with Samson. One is at another site just a couple of miles of Hukok. The mosaic also shows 2 human faces, apparently female, flanking a Hebrew inscription promising a reward to those who perform good deeds. Hukok, in the Wikipedia says. Now see the following. Jewish mosaics in Israel bring color to biblical accounts. These are colored in. Depiction of Numbers 13:23, grapes from the promised land. So those are the grapes, and here's another. At the ancient site of Hukok, near the Sea of Galilee in modern Israel, a number of stunning mosaics, we've looked at the first one, depicting biblical, astrological, and historical narratives have been uncovered in a Jewish village that flourished during the late Roman Empire. The colorful and large number of mosaics found in the synagogue challenged traditional views about Jewish art of the period as symbolic rather than representational of biblical text, bland and in decline during the period. Take a look at these mosaics. Yes, we get color from the mosaics, and we see 2 men carrying the grapes, which we just looked at. The following mosaic is the 2 human-faced portion of the Samson mosaic. Parts have been decayed at Hukok, so we took a look at this is Samson. A lot of decay there, a lot of roughed out, but we can see that he was not black. So these faces are primarily of Caucasian people. The Jewish mosaic of the 5th century. Notice also the following. 2018 photographs of newly discovered mosaics were posted in conjunction with a 70-page interim report on the excavation from 2014 to 2017. The new publication shows that the floor mosaic also depicts Noah's Ark, the 12 Israelite spies, and Moses' parting of the Red Sea, themes that are rarely, if ever, found in synagogues at the time. Other images that show Jonah being swallowed by the fish and the building of the Tower of Babel. Wikipedia. Experts said the wealth of mosaics show that Jewish life in the surrounding village flourished during the Christian rule in the 5th century. This challenges a widely held view that Jewish settlements in the area declined during that period. Quote, our work sheds light on a period when our written sources about Judaism are rabbinic and literature from the Jewish sages of this period and references in early Christian literature, said Magnus, who noted it showed only the viewpoint of the men who wrote it. Additionally, early Christian literature generally was hostile to Jews and Judaism. Well, take a look at these mosaics. Remember? Jonah and the whale. Caucasians. See, so, mosaic depicting Jonah being swallowed by a fish. The Hukok excavation project has involved experts from a host of universities, including Baylor University, Brigham Young, University of Toronto, as well as the Israel Antiquities Authority in Tel Aviv and University. Rogers J., 1600-year-old biblical mosaic discovered in Israel, sheds light on ancient Israel and Judaism. So if you look at the legs of the man being swallowed by the great fish, they show a light-skinned person, and the ones in the ship. One of the reasons I reported about all of this is because of several people who have repeatedly tried to insist that the ancient Hebrews and Jews were black. While there was a mixture that went with the Israelites out of the land of Egypt, it is like some were black. It is likely that some were black, but to insist that most Israelites were black is not the case. Try to insist that. The Apostle